Hi everyone, I'm Pau and I'm going to talk about article guidance. Creating a new article is an exciting activity for many users, including newcomers. However, most of their articles get deleted on desktop and especially on mobile. This is a problem for them in terms of being demotivating and not encouraging them to continue to become more experienced editors, and also generates a lot of work to the community to review, comment, and eventually delete those articles. When looking at the process of creating a new article, editors face a blank page and they don't have much guidance. So often the content quality doesn't follow the guidelines of the community and quality may be low. Communities have tried to create mechanisms to deal with low quality contributions and try to reduce them. So in some cases asking editors to take tests to self-assess whether they are qualified to participate. Have you been paid to create this content, for example? In other cases, they send editors to navigate documentation, which can include lots of information of this generic process to create any kind of article. With article guidance, we want to try a new approach because the previous ones may be working for a good set of users, but numbers suggest that there are still many that may not be benefiting. And this is an experiment to try a new approach where we think we can take advantage of knowing more about the type of article the user is trying to create, to provide guidance that is more specific, and by being more specific, hopefully being easy to follow and benefit and have more impact to the quality of the content created. So we want to know if the user is trying to create an article about a dinosaur, a painter, sports event, and provide guidance about that specific type of article. So this is a new approach, it's experimental, and it's based on the concept of learn by doing. So community-defined contextual guidance will be created for certain types of articles, for example, a city, that would help editors creating new articles about different cities, San Francisco, Paris, New York, to be exposed to that specific guidance for cities that can help them without asking for additional prerequisites. They would feel that they are being assisted to achieve their goal of creating content from the beginning. Some of the key principles, we are thinking of this guidance to be community defined, so communities can create or adjust these outlines for a specific type of article, which advice to provide for company type of articles, for biographies, for sports events. We want to keep editing freedom, so we think of this guidance as an optional layer that is helpful, but not something that gets in the way of editing. You will be able to edit with the same tools in the same way if you want, just having access to something that we hope it would be useful for both the less experienced editors to have guidance that helps them to create quality content, but also to the more experienced editors, saving them time. For example, instead of looking for good examples of city articles to understand which is the common structure, provide that at hand more easily to create sections that are commonly relevant for those, for example. We want also this to be sustainable for the wiki ecosystem. We want to help editors to create quality content without adding moderation burden. And this is based on this idea of helping reviewers to influence quality at scale. Instead of reviewing every single city article, they can incorporate some of the guidance to the general type of article for cities that any of those editors creating the specific articles will benefit from. So as I mentioned, this is a new approach, but in a certain way it's based on existing practices. If we look at an article like the Bengal tiger and the Siberian tiger, we'll see that table of contents look mostly the same. There is this kind of notion of a set of aspects that make sense for when you're writing an article about a tiger. Even if we look at some of the content for the taxonomy section, we may find even the same exact sentence there with probably the same reference, because both of them are tigers. So there's opportunities for common content or structures to be reused, and communities have been providing that guidance in a very manual way of instructions, like here, how to write about the article, the type of animal, with a description of the names and scientific names, and more at least useful for those not familiar with this type of articles, with examples. And similarly, providing structures that people can follow and provide advice on which type of aspects make sense to cover on certain types of articles. So yeah, this has been happening, but has not been very well integrated in the regular tools. People need to discover that, and that's a big challenge for newcomers. To illustrate the proposal, we'll see an example. In this case, it's based on the Siberian tiger. So let's imagine that the article doesn't exist on Wikipedia, which, by the way, that's the case for over 200 languages still. And the new editor wants to create the article. So the editor can type the article title, Siberian tiger, and the system can suggest which topic the user is trying to create the article. In case that Siberian tiger, there's a type of tiger, but also some sculpture or some park. In this case, this is based on Wikidata items that match the title, so you can indicate that, yeah, Siberian tiger, the animal, is what I want to create. Alternatively, if that was not the case, that you search for Siberian tiger and it's not present on Wikidata, you would be able to select a specific type instead and say, okay, this is about an animal. Either knowing the specific topic or the type of article would help the system to provide more specific guidance, as we'll see next. One of the key aspects that we learn from communities that it's important in this process is the notability, and we are incorporating this notion of notability risk. So some types of articles may have a higher notability risk. Maybe it's okay to let any editor to create any type of article about cities, but maybe it's not about biographies or animals, as we're illustrating this example. So here, this could be based on conditions like not allowing people to create articles about animals if they don't exist in 5 other Wikipedias as a sign for notability, or they're not present on Wikidata, or you have not provided citations in advance, which we'll see next. But the important thing is that, yeah, this can be adjusted to be applied for those cases and those types of articles where there is higher risk of notability issues. And in that case, we will not let editors to continue to create the article, and instead propose a set of alternatives that help them to contribute maybe to similar articles that already have signs of being notable by being in other wikis, or being listed by the community, or get more experience doing some other smaller editing activities. In another aspect that we incorporated in the workflow is to encourage adding sources earlier and helping to educate users about what's a good reference. And in this case, again, based on the type of articles, communities can provide a set of recommended or discouraged sources. So for example, if it's common for editors to create articles and just link to YouTube, and that's problematic, maybe we can use this opportunity to explain why it's not a good idea for this type of article. And for other types of sources, maybe do the opposite of marking them as recommended source by the community. When the sources are provided, and we encourage that also to educate about the notion of having sources early and provide information that it's based on sources, we can show specific guidance that community crafted for this type of article. So when starting an article about animals, which are key things to keep in mind, not long documentation, but in the same way that you would provide quick advice to someone in an editathon, that can help them to have that in mind. And when they start the article, there could be contents preloaded that help to get started. It doesn't have to be a full outline for the whole article, but maybe an initial paragraph with aspects to fill, citation needed placeholders to encourage, again, the idea that the data needs to be backed up by references, and maybe one or two sections to help them understand what to cover, again, as a good first version of the article. And at that point, this is where users are on VE. So we made this transition from capturing the intent of the user to transferring to VE, and from that point, that is the regular VE way of working. In this case, for example, for citation needed, that would allow you to select and provide a citation, but that's the current visual editor behavior. There are many more things that we can do to provide guidance while you are editing and creating this content, but that would be part of a second intervention, and we are exploring those ideas currently. So to get to some of the concepts that we saw in more detail, how is the guidance defined? Well, there are three aspects to keep in mind. First, these outlines that encapsulate the guidance for a certain type of articles are connected with Wikidata items, and they take advantage of their hierarchy. So basically, if we provide a guidance for a museum that is connected to museum item, any museum like Museo del Prado will benefit from that guidance. So anything under that hierarchy. If we wanted something more specific for art museums in particular, an outline can be created for that, and then the particular Museo del Prado or the Louvre, those would be using that outline. So that provides this flexibility for communities to provide guidance for very, very specific types of articles, or more general ones, or a combination. Also, as I mentioned, there could be community-defined restrictions. We identified an initial set of labels for the notability risk that limit how much we allow the creation of those types of articles under specific circumstances. So for example, for a type of article like a biography, you could define that only topics that exist on Wikidata can be created, or only topics that are available in 5 other languages, or topics when the user has provided sources, or making the restriction apply only to the less experienced editors, junior editors, or limit the publication to a draft. And those could be combined. So you can combine the idea of asking for topics that are available across different wikis, but apply that only to junior editors that don't have the expertise to be likely to succeed if they try to create an article about a person that is not on Wikidata and has not been covered by other languages, as a sign of likely being potentially problematic in terms of notability. And finally, how are those outlines, how is this guidance encoded? We are defining it as a wiki page with some special markup. In this case, there could be an outline about cities that it's connected to the article type Q515, which is the Wikidata ID for cities, and has a notability risk of Wikidata cross-wiki, and has some messaging that will be shown to make sure that we are providing good advice to create a city article, and then some contents that could be some examples of paragraphs, sections, maybe include an info box if that could be useful. And yeah, this is how it would look like, just a regular wiki page. When it's rendered, it may provide some context that this is an article guidance for the type of city, the notability restrictions, making it easy to understand at a glance. And when it's applied, those contents will be added when you land to Visual Editor and would be used for adjusting the workflow as we saw in the example. Okay, so what we are working on now most immediately is this initial intervention that is focused on junior editors on mobile, for them to create articles and be more likely to succeed while reducing the burden on patrollers. We are focusing on the less experienced side of editors because they are normally the ones struggling the most when creating a new article, and also on mobile because we want to see if this project helps to do both, make it easy to create good content and simplify the process so that it could be a more appealing task for mobile editors, thinking that nowadays most of our readers are on mobile, and if we convert them to editing, they will be editing on mobile. The scope of the initial intervention, as you've seen in the workflow, is focused on what happens before editing, capturing the intent and preparation to edit. Another exploration will identify opportunities to provide more assistance while you are editing, and we may explore also some aspects when you publish, what happens next, inviting you to improve the article. But yeah, the main focus is on what happens before, as we were seeing in the workflow. And we are focusing on junior editors creating a new article using Visual Editor on mobile in a set of mid-size wikis. Why mid-size wikis or large mid wikis? Because we want to focus on wikis that are large enough to have these dynamics of lots of articles of low quality being created, and that creating problems for moderators and having a good influx of activity so that we can make an experiment and really learn if our ideas solve the issues. But focusing on wikis that are still not the super large ones like English Wikipedia, because that means that those other wikis still have many millions of articles that are valid articles to create. So we can experiment with both when someone tries to create an invalid article about themselves, for example, or when they are trying to create an article that maybe exists on English Wikipedia and it makes sense to be covered also in their wiki but has not been created yet. The specific list of pilot wikis, we are working on it. We have an initial proposal with Arabic, Bengali, Japanese, Persian, Portuguese, and Turkish Wikipedias. Obviously, we'll go to experiment with them only if they are interested on joining the experiment. So we are at this stage of connecting with them and explaining the project and seeing their interest. But yeah, this list can be expanded based on community interest of not participating from this or from others communities to be interested in participating. A little bit of why those wikis seem relevant. When we focus on junior editors and the articles they create on mobile, they seem to have a high level of activity. So for reference, we can see last year the number of articles that were created by junior editors on mobile on English Wikipedia was 1.6 thousand, and we see that from the pilot wikis, many being around those numbers or even higher. When we look at the range of how much of a deletion problem those articles have, we see that the pilot wikis cover a broad range from around 60% in the case of Japanese to 93% in the case of Turkish. For reference, English seems to have even less of an issue in this user segment with 53%, still a good percentage of articles being deleted. But I think that this range identifies a broad range of probably different issues and good opportunities to learn what works in different cases. So, as I mentioned, the idea is to invite the pilot wikis and discuss the proposal, then collaborate with them to define outlines for the relevant types of articles that they consider, launch an A/B testing experiment so that we can really see if there's a difference between not providing guidance or the current experience that users have on creating an article versus providing guidance based on the initiative, and measuring that impact, and based on the results decide on the next step. So this is a bit of the high-level view of the plan. In more detail, what are we experimenting and what are we measuring? So as I mentioned, the idea is that currently, from the many people that try to create a new article and do so, a lot of those articles get deleted, and that's bad for their motivation and also generates work for reviewers. What we want to get is to increase the chances of more of those articles to survive the reviewing process by being better initial versions of the articles. And for those cases where the article doesn't belong to the wiki or it was too complex, at least prevent those from happening, but in a way that at least gives editor an understanding of why and makes them still more likely to try again in a better context, or try some other activities, get experience, try a different topic, and not lose those editors but still get them to become better editors. The key aspects to look and measure here that we identified are, on the one hand, deletion/survival rate of the articles created and the number of surviving articles. We are focusing on those metrics because that helps to provide a good perspective of how we are trying to make new articles more likely to survive, but doing so without reducing the number of good articles created. So we are not making survival rate better by adding barriers and making only possible to create an article if we filtered the most experienced editors and then think that, okay, most articles succeed, but now we have very few articles created. So we want to have a balance of both. Articles more likely to survive, but not discouraging the creation of the surviving articles. So surviving articles should not reduce. We can try to reduce those articles that would end up being deleted. That's also part of the goal. To have a broader understanding, looking at whether people abandon in the middle of the process, the total number of articles created, how that changes, edition retention, signs of quality in the content, all that can be also helpful to provide context, but the key measurements are those that I mentioned. For the experiment, we are planning to organize an A/B test in pilot wikis, so users will get to the usual entry points to create a new article, and half of them will continue to have the same experience, the other half would get to the new experience, and we will compare the results, so that makes things more comparable, and we will have more confidence to know that any difference will be due to the new experience. And apart from the experiment, we will also be providing a direct way to access the features so that communities can adjust those outlines and try the feature and provide feedback. And communities, apart from those in the pilot wikis, can ask for early access to the feature. An idea of how that works for entry points: currently, when there are red links, either in a list of articles to be created from a wiki project or on a Wikipedia page, if you tap on one on mobile, you get this panel telling that the article doesn't exist and inviting you to create a new page. And basically, with the experiment, half of the users will just go to the current experience of a blank page in Visual Editor, and the other half would go to the new experience where we try to understand the type of article they are trying to create and provide the associated guidance. We found also specific cases of particular entry points. For example, Turkish Wikipedia has a template in their main page that invites to create content. So this seems an interesting opportunity to connect the experiment to those existing entry points. We're looking for existing entry points because adding new entry points will also generate traffic to the current experience and more articles of low quality to be created. So we want to experiment only with existing entry points to avoid this influx. One particularity of this specific entry point is that it's connected to Article Wizard, so it will allow to compare, in this case, the guided experience with Article Wizard. If you know of other relevant entry points of how people create articles, especially on mobile, we are interested to learn and explore how we can connect the experiment to those. And yeah, that's related to a really important piece, the collaboration with the community. As I mentioned, many of the ideas are around community configurable guidance, so we need to collaborate on defining those. So we need information from you for each community, which types of articles to support, which are some key types of articles that junior editors would benefit the most if we provide them with some guidance, which are created more often, which are created and deleted more often, which are the most problematic to review. So basically communities can tell us, okay, we may want to focus on biographies, animals, movies, cities. You tell us. For each of those, for biographies, for cities, which are the recommended and discouraged sources? Are there specific sources for that type of article that are recommended? For example, for animals, maybe National Geographic is recommended, or YouTube is discouraged. We want to know about that to provide guidance for those types. Maybe there's also some general recommended or discouraged references in your wiki that we are also interested in. For those specific types, is there a high risk of lack of notability in some cases? In which cases, and where should we direct editors instead? So you can tell us, okay, for biographies, we can direct people to create content in the draft namespace when they are trying to create an article about a topic that it's not covered by 5 other languages, because that's a sign that probably is not notable and that has been problematic in our experience in the past. For each type, any advice that you would share with an editor trying to create this type of article? As I mentioned earlier, any brief, specific advice to the type of article that helps them to keep something in mind that it's really useful. For writing an animal, make sure it's part of this list that lists the animals, or check that it's not duplicated, or any other advice that is key and based on your experience reviewing those articles generates problems if you're not providing it. We would like to know to incorporate it into these outlines. And similarly, any content that may help editors get started better than just a blank page. Maybe a typical paragraph that appears in animal articles that can help to understand editors how to start, or a couple of sections that are key to indicate which essential aspects to cover for the article. And yeah, those questions are structured in a form that we invite you to fill. So feel free to use the QR code or the link in the slides to provide that information. And with that, we will be creating an initial set of outlines to share back with you for reviewing and iterating and trying as soon as we have an initial implementation of the system that allows to try all this, so that it can be iterated and have really guidance that it's the most useful to create that type of articles. There's more information of the project at MediaWiki article guidance, so feel free to check. also go to the talk page and ask any question there. We are happy to provide an answer, and being at an early stage, it may spark ideas and open questions to explore and help us to evolve the project in the right direction. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, and as I mentioned, feel free to share any question.